Good morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whatever your life's journey, whomever you love, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight. Welcome to this online worship service. Welcome to those of you watching live Sunday morning using Zoom, and welcome to those of you who are watching a recording of the service later on Chalice's YouTube channel. For those of us using Zoom, please notice on your menu that there's a button that says CC Live Transcript. This is Zoom's closed captioning service, and you can click on it to hide subtitle or show subtitle as you choose. You're in control if that function is on or off on your screen. Also on your menu is the chat button. For those of you who like to use the chat box during the service, which you can see we're doing right now, greeting each other, you're welcome to use the chat during the service. Be sure that when you post, that you've opened the little blue menu there to select everyone. We want everyone to be able to share what's in the chat. If you only post to panelists and host and panelists or whatever it says, it only comes to me, and we want to use the chat for everyone. I also just noticed this morning, after all this time, I don't know how long it's been there, but there's a little emoji button you can use to share emojis. So I find that kind of exciting. And if you have the emoji button, I encourage you to post some emojis during the service. Any change is fun in this format. So let's give ourselves a big hug of hello, welcome, good morning. I love seeing the emojis in the chat. I finally want to especially welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice this morning. Towards the end of the service, I'll put a link in the chat box for adding your name to our email list. That same link can be found on our website under our Welcome Newcomers section. And you can use that link to sign up for our weekly email. This is the best way to get information about our groups and activities, most of which are still happening using Zoom, and the Zoom links are in our weekly email, but we are starting to have some meal activities happening in person, of course, so that information is there as well. Now, let's take a breath together.
We acknowledge that our service is taking place on the stolen territory of the Kumeyaay, meaning humans or people, and the Payamkawishim, meaning Western people. A land acknowledgement works to undo the intentional erasure of Indigenous people and to support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown. We acknowledge the original inhabitants as a first and critical step toward learning and working with Indigenous communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and sacred homeland.
Now we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The flaming chalice was first used during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee as a symbol of life-saving refuge for people fleeing persecution in Europe. May our chalice flame burn brightly, that all who are seeking may find us. words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Viola Abbott. We are Unitarian Universalists. When we lift up our 7 principles, some of us think of them as a form of theology, but they are more important to our collective than that. They do not tell us what we should believe. They tell us how we should be. They tell us how we should act in the larger world and with each other. We are brought here today by the fact that Unitarian Universalism has fallen short of the image that was presented to the world and to many of those who embrace this religion. But we are also brought here today by the truth that Unitarian Universalism has shifted course to move toward a place of wholeness, a place that perhaps never existed for us as a denomination. It has been a long and sometimes unforgiving road to today, but we are here today because we are mindful of that past and because we have hope for the future. We want the practice of this faith to be a fulfilling manifestation of its promise. Open your hearts, seek new ways of understanding. Come, let us worship together. You're invited to join in singing. Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by sharing and honoring our joys and sorrows. If you'd like to share a joy or sorrow with the congregation this morning, now is our time for sharing in the chat box. These won't be spoken out loud, so they don't become part of the recording. If you'd like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow, or to make a prayer request, you can email me, and I'll put my email address in the chat box.
Our story is called The Apple Tree, written by Sandy Tharp Thee, an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation. It is illustrated by Marlena Campbell Hodson. The book is written in English and Cherokee. One day, a little Cherokee boy planted an apple seed in his backyard. The boy watered the seed and kept the weeds away. One morning, a seedling appeared. The little boy said, "Look at you! Once you were just a seed. Now you are an apple tree." He put a sign around the tree so no one would step on it. In no time at all, the seedling grew branches and more leaves. The boy was so proud. "Look at you! Once you were just a seed. Now you are an apple tree. You are beautiful." The little tree really was not so beautiful, but because the little boy loved the tree so much, the tree felt beautiful. Still, a few days later, the boy found the little apple tree sad and droopy. "What's wrong, little tree?" the boy asked. "What good is an apple tree that makes no apples?" asked the little tree. The boy replied, "When we are big, we will both be able to do lots of things." Yet as he walked away, he saw the tree still looked sad. That night, as the tree slept, the boy tied a big red apple on a branch of the little apple tree. The next morning, the boy went to check on his friend. "Look at you! You have a big red apple," he said. The little apple tree said, "You have cared for me and loved me. I would like you to have my first apple." "Thank you," the boy said, and he took a great big bite. Delicious! As the seasons passed, the boy and the apple tree grew. They both grew tall and strong. Once again, the boy went to the tree. "Look at you! Once just a tiny seed, now you are an apple tree. You are beautiful." The apple tree was beautiful. Pink blossoms covered it from tip to top. Butterflies, birds, and honeybees came to visit. And when the pink blossoms fell off, yellow apples took their place. So many yellow apples the branches bowed from the weight. Once again, the boy said to the tree, "Look at you! You were once just a seed. Now you are a big apple tree." The apple tree replied, "Yes, I am a big apple tree now, and these yellow apples are very grand. But I will never forget my first apple, the one the Creator made red, just to show how much I am loved."
When I first discovered Unitarian Universalism and was considering whether it might be a good fit for me, reading the 7 Principles was an important spiritual experience. Maybe you have felt that too at times, reading those words, speaking those words during our worship together, as we often do as an affirmation. The 7 principles are a beautiful expression of our highest values and hopes for the world, and they are important to many of us. They are the closest thing we have to a statement of beliefs, a creed. They come to us through our congregations belonging to the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA. When a congregation joins the UUA, we are saying that we affirm and promote those 7 principles. So if you remember, the preamble to the principles reads, we, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and so on. When you join Chalice as a member, you sign a card stating that you are in agreement with the bylaws and purpose of Chalice, the Chalice congregation, and in general agreement with the principles and purposes of the Unitarian Universalist Association. You join the congregation, and the congregation has joined the UUA, and all our UU congregations and our members are in relationship with each other through these covenants and agreements. For those of you who aren't members, which is many of you, your relationship to the congregation and the denomination is less formalized, but you're obviously here because you share these values and affirm these principles, or at least willing to be part of a community where these principles are central. So it may be surprising to learn that we regularly consider revising our principles. The 7 that we have now were adopted in 1985 and have remained unchanged for over 35 years. The bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association require that our principles and sources are studied for possible revision at least every 15 years, or more frequently if the UUA Board of Trustees desires it. This provision is found in section C-15.1, section C, paragraph 6 of the UUA bylaws. So you can hear, if we're required to review the principles at least every 15 years, and it's been 35 years, then we've looked at them at least twice. Changes have been proposed in the past, but it takes a vote of a 2/3 majority of delegates in order to pass such changes, rightly so, and no votes have passed to change the wording of our principles. As a side note, when we approved the 7 principles in 1985, we also approved what were then 5 sources of our faith tradition. We have since then added a 6th source, the earth-centered traditions, and we have changed the phrase prophetic men and women to the more inclusive phrase prophetic people. So we have made changes to the sources. I imagine that this talk of bylaws and delegates and wording reviews may not sound spiritual, and it may not even sound interesting. And yet this is how the shared life of our faith tradition is shaped. I became a Unitarian Universalist in 2004. Would I have if the 6th source of earth-centered traditions had not been added in 1995? Would this still have felt like the right fit for me? I don't know. It is central to who we are as Unitarian Universalists that we continually reflect on the question first posed by Reverend Theodore Parker in 1841. What is it that's permanent about our faith, and what is it that's transient? If we were to decide that our principles and sources as they are written right now are permanent and cannot be changed, then I would say we were no longer Unitarian Universalists. It is the nature of our faith that we stand on shifting sands, an unsteady and uncomfortable place to be. Yes. But we are here together because we are just as uncomfortable, proclaiming that truth and revelation are fixed and finite. Our Congregationalist kin in the United Church of Christ put it this way: God is still speaking. This is how they articulate that openness to discovering and naming new truths. In 2017, the UUA Board of Trustees formed a study commission called the Article 2 Study Commission. The principles and sources are found in Article 2 of the UUA bylaws. The study commission is charged with reviewing Article 2 and to proposing revisions that will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be a relevant and powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. That study commission is doing its work and will propose changes to the principles and sources at the 2023 General Assembly of the UUA. Making a change to Article 2 of the bylaws is a 2-year process, so changes will be voted on in 2023 and 2024. So to be perfectly clear, the Article 2 Study Commission of the UUA has not yet proposed any changes to our principles or sources. The commission will make its report to the UUA Board of Trustees in January 2023, and then proposed changes will come to the UUA General Assembly that June. So now you are wondering, if no changes have yet been proposed, then what is this 8th principle that we're hearing about? The current hope of adding an 8th principle, articulating a commitment to dismantling racism, comes from a grassroots movement began back in 2013. As I have described, it is not easy or simple to revise our principles, and they haven't been revised in 35 years. This movement to add an 8th principle asks congregations to vote to add the principle at our congregational level, in the hopes that by the time we are ready to vote as a denomination, we will be ready to make this significant change as a larger body. This is the wording of the proposed 8th principle. We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Over 100 UU congregations have already voted to adopt this 8th principle. So we know a lot already about the kinds of questions that people have. And the first thing that many UUs want to talk about is the wording, wondering if we can't revise it or wordsmith it. It doesn't match the syntax of the other principles. It's long. It has a lot of phrases. Those of us who were English majors or teachers or who are avid readers immediately want to have a go at rewriting it. Here's the thing. When you spend some time considering and discussing the ideas articulated here, you will find, I believe, that every word is necessary. And changing or removing a word changes the meaning of the statement and diminishes its impact. A lot of our discussion in the coming months will be about these words and what they mean. I'm not going to leave them up the whole time. Here are my 2 cents. In general, I think we err on the side of being too vague and imprecise in our words, even though we work very hard not to be. If you show our 7 principles to religious people of other faith traditions, you will find that most of them will say that they agree with those principles and they're at the center of their faith tradition too. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think we feel like the 7 principles say something special and unique about who we are. The 8th principle is written very precisely, and there are several phrases packed with meaning. I will be preaching 3 sermons in the new year about the phrases spiritual wholeness, beloved community, and oppressions in ourselves. There is a lot of meaning packed into the eighth principle. You should know who wrote these words. Paula Cole Jones is a name you will hear again and again. She's an African-American Unitarian Universalist, lifelong, UU, and a consultant on multicultural competencies. After working for 15 years with UU congregations on racial and social justice issues, and despite continued efforts by the UUA to tackle racism, Jones realized that a person could believe they were a good UU and following the 7 principles without ever thinking about or dealing with racism or other systemic oppressions. Paula drafted the 8th principle with a white UU man named Bruce Pollock Johnson. And Paula remains the most visible leader in organizing congregational leaders to begin congregational discussions around adopting the 8th principle. She is also one of the members of the Article 2 Study Commission, and that is not an accident. Another question many people have is, are we allowed to have different principles than other congregations? Like, what does it mean to us to vote to change the principles just in our congregation? And what keeps us from just making up an entirely new set of principles for ourselves? Well, as a reminder, as a member congregation of the UUA, we covenant to affirm and promote the shared principles articulated in the UUA bylaws. So no matter what we do with the bylaws at the congregational level, we still are covenanted to affirm and promote the principles as they're stated through the UUA. And then, yes, we could write more principles for just our congregation to affirm and promote. Our congregational bylaws and policies are written by us, for us. They're not shared among congregations or anything like that. But we aren't really setting out to write new principles for our congregation. We're being asked to join in a movement that organizers hope will result ultimately in the revision of the principles at the UUA level. We're being asked to join in a strategy to effect change in our denomination. And we're being asked to do spiritual work ourselves in studying and wrestling with the 8th principle. So I've talked a lot about the nuts and bolts of how our principles get revised and the voting and the study commission. But let's not forget to consider the spirit of the 8th principle. The 8th principle is a call to white UUs in particular to stop ignoring the racism that is part of the daily lives of UUs who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We are being called to change. Our story this morning is from Cherokee culture, not the dominant culture, not white culture. I'm not quite sure what the moral of the story of the apple tree is. I mean, I can analyze it and come up with different things, but if I had to say what I think it's about as a whole, I'm not sure. Maybe it doesn't even have a moral. Maybe the fact that I think it should comes from my culture, from white culture. You know this if you have ever traveled to a non-Western country, right? When we travel somewhere different, not everything makes sense there, makes sense to us, the traveler, because the norms and traditions of another culture are foreign to us. And we, the travelers, are slightly uncomfortable, right? We can't read the signs. We don't know what everything means. We're outside our comfort zone, unsure, uncertain. That's how you really know you're having a cross-cultural experience, that you don't quite know what's going on. You're a little uncomfortable and a little confused, but that's okay. That's exactly why we left home, to travel somewhere new. We are accustomed to thinking of church as a kind of home, somewhere we are comfortable. But the 8th principle reminds us that we actually came to Unitarian Universalism to be called to our best selves, to be transformed, to be inspired to do and be more than we can be on our own. Ours is absolutely an uncomfortable faith tradition. We wouldn't be here if we were people who wanted to be given simple answers to hard questions. And we wouldn't be here if we didn't think we really can make the world a better place. If we adopt the 8th principle and commit ourselves to the work it calls us to do, we will indeed be travelers in a strange new land. Some of us may be excited to go to that new place, and some of us may be anxious and even fearful. That's okay. I need to be candid with you that I am absolutely passionate about adopting the 8th principle. Before I was your minister, I was someone who came to Unitarian Universalism because I wanted to be part of a religious community where my multiracial husband and I could feel that anti-racism work was central. I grieve the ways that Unitarian Universalism has sometimes fallen short of our stated ideals, and I am excited that our denomination may make a commitment to anti-racism part of the principles that I have treasured since I first read them. Making this change to our principles will be a very big deal. But let me also be clear. My enthusiasm for adding this principle at the denominational level does not mean that I am here to push for what we decide to do as a congregation. What is important to our community is the discussion and consideration we will give to this topic in the coming months. Maybe we'll vote to adopt it, maybe we won't. As your minister, I'm invested in us having a good discussion and a good process. And I'm grateful to our congregational leaders who are serving on the 8th Principle Task Force. I hope you will join me in opening your hearts to the work we have ahead of us. We're beginning today with a discussion room on the 8th principle during our Zoom coffee hour after the service. Now, you are invited to join in singing.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. I said peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. As Buddhist teacher Sharon Salzberg writes, generosity is characterized by the inner quality of letting go, or relinquishing. Being able to let go, to give up, to renounce, to give generously. These capacities spring from the same source within us. When we practice generosity, we open to all of these liberating qualities simultaneously. Please text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't texted a donation before, know that once you text the amount, the numbers, you'll get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. And if you've already entered this information previously when you've donated, you don't need to enter it again. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate the word pledge after the dollar amount. And also know that you can make a text donation anytime, doesn't need to be just during the worship hour. So the phone number will be on screen in a moment, and I'll also put it in the chat box. Please give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. Open hearts, open minds, open doors, nurturing spirits, seeking justice within the wider world. This is our mission.
Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone must change. No one stays the same. The young become the old, and mysteries do unfold. But that's the way of time. No, nothing and no one goes unchanged. There are not many things in life I can be sure of, except rain comes from the lights up the sky, and the hummingbirds, they do fly. Winter turns to spring, and a wounded heart will heal, but that's the way of time. No one goes unchanged. The young become the old, and mysteries do unfold, but that's the way of time. No one and nothing goes unchanged. There are not many things in life I can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds, and the sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds, they do fly. Rain comes from the clouds, and the sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds, they do fly. Oh, rain comes from the clouds, and the sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds, they do fly. Oh, rain comes from the clouds, and the sun lights up the sky, and music makes me cry.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
I will try again. Before we close the service, I'd like to remind newcomers to please use the link in the chat box. I just posted it to add your name to our email list. Our closing words come from Reverend Rebecca Savage. Spirit of life, spirit of love, we have gathered under the banner of a shared faith. We are born of a welcoming grace that extends and receives love. We are touched by the ways we have fallen short of who we strive to be, and we now are reborn, forged by a greater courage. Let us move from this time encouraged and refreshed for the journey ahead. So mote it be. You're invited to close our time together by singing the well. Everyone is invited to coffee hour. And as a reminder, one of the breakout rooms in coffee hour will be for discussing the 8th principle. Go in peace, go with love.